Following a botched pollen delivery, Queen Bee Melonia Boom demands that the worker bee who commanded the operation, Colonel Guillaume de Bourgeois, retire from duty in light of his other recent mishaps. Not content with retirement, Bourgeois visits his doctor, Dr. Antoine Fauché, who runs some tests the same night and diagnoses him with terminal cancer, revealing that he has a full 6 days left to live. The next morning, Bourgeois readies his pollination crew to head out to work, but Queen Bump's royal guard stops them from proceeding. As they are escorted back, he learns by word of mouth that his doctor leaked the news of his medical diagnosis to the Queen a mere half hour after the conclusion of his appointment. Bourgeois pleads to Queen Bump to let him stay in the pollination works, but she is not interested with even giving him a demotion and would rather see him walk away from his line of work entirely. Bourgeois offers a compromise. He spent his final days on the front lines of the hive's defense force, but she refuses again. He pleads a third time, requesting that he take a simple role in training larvae in the nursery, but Queen Bump says no, dismissing the guards to speak with him alone. Bump tells Bourgeois that she recently had a dream where she saw Bourgeois, a golden-colored beehive, and Lion du Hansome, the religiously significant dandelion beyond the dark forest, all at once. Bump says that her soothsayer, Jedi Vancel, interpreted the dream for her and believes it means that Bourgeois will go to Hyven, bee heaven, if he makes it to the top of Lion du Hansome before his death. There, Vancelon said, he can free his soul from his exoskeleton and finally be free. With 5 days left to live, Bourgeois sets out the next morning for Lion du Hansome. An unexpected rainstorm hits within the first hour, forcing him to take shelter under a tree. He searches for food, finally setting upon an ant he finds carrying a giant leaf towards a tall pile of dirt. After some misdirecting and deception, Bourgeois convinces the ant to drop the leaf and grabs the ant, lifting the ant to the top of the dirt pile where he plans to sacrifice its head, thorax, and limbs to the bee gods. He removes the ant's abdomen, but as he is doing so, hundreds of ants pour out of the dirt mound. Bourgeois barely escapes alive and is forced to drop the ant's abdomen to escape, coming away only with 2 of the dismembered ant's legs. He tries to take shelter atop a tree, but mistakes a bird nest for an acorn and loses a leg to a baby bird. Bourgeois flees to the underside of a molehill, where he spends the night and eats the ant limbs alone. The next morning, Bourgeois is awoken by the sound of an ant infantry marching outside his resting spot. After overhearing a hostile interrogation of a ladybug, Bourgeois realizes that the ants are looking for him, and he flies down a tunnel in the molehill. A few minutes later, a mole tunnels nearby, which Bourgeois mistakes for a bird and attempts to fight by biting its forehead. The mole kicks dirt back at him, trapping Bourgeois right by the exit hole. He frees himself in an hour, but has yet again exhausted his stamina and looks for food. Bourgeois searches a nearby meadow for flowers, but is unsuccessful. He eventually decides to retrace his steps to the dirt mound he stumbled upon. Bourgeois forgets about the ant colony incident, however, and only realizes his mistake seconds before touching down on the mound. He tries to steer around, but his wings become tired, and he drops to the ground, scuttling atop a burnt stump. Hundreds of ants pour out of all sides of the mound and attempt to surround him, and a dozen ants climb the stump to confront him. Bourgeois is able to bludgeon the first 2 with his front legs, but his front knees are gashed by the 3rd ant. He wounds the next 2 via biting and antenna bashing, and kills the 5th challenging ant through head dismemberment. But he is now surrounded on all sides by hundreds of ants. When all seems lost, an ant-hungry snake plows through the terrace, consuming dozens of ants in his path. Bourgeois blends in with the blackened stump, but the orange-brown ants around him are unable to stay hidden or escape in time, and they scatter in chaos. He flees with one of the dead ants to a human-grown strawberry bush, where he is able to sacrifice part of the ant to the bee gods and get his fill before the night's end. Was that planned?
Keep going, no! It's ruining immersion.
With only 3 days left, Bourgeois spends an hour flying what he thinks to be a new route. It is only when he spots the old hive does he realize that he has been going the wrong way. He realizes his memory is now fading as a result of his terminal cancer, but still retraces his steps. Successfully. A few minutes the opposite direction of the berry bush, he encounters a group of honeybees, one of whom recognizes him from a pollination expedition earlier that season. Bourgeois explains his religious pilgrimage to the honeybees. Buzztin, a fellow worker bee he knew in years prior, offers to try and help him, and gathers a few fellow honeybees who are traveling to nearby flower fields to serve as escorts for part of the way. They make a great deal of ground, and Buzztin gives Bourgeois some advice and navigation pointers before he and the honeybees fly back to their hive. Despite his failing memory, Bourgeois is able to commit these tips to mind, and realizes that he can make it to Lyon du Han Sommet in one day. Contented, he decides to take shade in a nearby blackberry bush as the hot sun begins to slowly set. As he flies toward his destination, one of his legs is caught stuck in a spiderweb. Things get dark, and Bourgeois sees a spider crawling out. Upside down, he is unable to right himself to chew away the part of the spiderweb that his leg is tied to. With the spider mere centimeters away, Bourgeois is forced to bite his own leg off to escape safety. In pain yet again, he flies away to a pine tree, but is unable to find anywhere inside it to hide. He mistakes the trunk for a branch, and gets his antenna stuck on some sap. After struggling in the darkness to free himself, Bourgeois makes no progress and is unable to stay conscious, falling to sleep for the night. With only 2 days left to live, Bourgeois wakes up after a shower of wood chunks lands on him from above, dislodging his left antenna from the sap. He spies the source of the falling wood chunks, an angry woodpecker not having much success with his current spot on the tree, and realizes the dangers of his current location. As he grunts and struggles to free himself, the woodpecker notices Bourgeois and swoops down to attempt to eat him.
But realizes that he will eventually be dead if he is not able to get unstuck from the sap. Eventually, Bourgeois is able to get the woodpecker to nail the spot on the tree on which his right antenna is stuck, freeing him but costing him the upper half of the antenna as well. After a brief chase through the branches, Bourgeois is able to escape the woodpecker and heads towards the now visible dark forest. He makes it through in little time, but his wings are now more exhausted than ever before. Bourgeois settles on his last meal, an unsuspecting grasshopper in a large, new-mown field. He sneaks up behind the grasshopper, but sneezes, startling it. The grasshopper leaps forward, causing his legs to fly back and hit Bourgeois in the front. He feels little pain, however, and suspects that his nervous system may be failing him. Unable to use his antennae to search out for the grasshopper, Bourgeois uses his weak wings once again to fly high and scout out the grasshopper. He tracks the grasshopper, but loses sight of it as it bounces into a blueberry bush. Bourgeois enters the bush and mistakes a praying mantis for the grasshopper. After some clumsy attempts to sting the creature, the mantis gashes Bourgeois across the thorax, forcing him to escape once again. Bourgeois snags a blueberry and is barely able to make it to a fig tree, where he spies several aphids. Bourgeois kills the aphids and debates whether to sacrifice the aphids or the blueberry to the bee gods. In the end, he decides to make a stew inside of the skin of the blueberry with its innards and some of the dead aphids, setting aside some of both for the sacrifice, which he promptly makes. As the stew settles, Bourgeois stitches his gash back up with parts of a fig leaf. He eats his meal with an uneasy feeling about him, anxious for what is coming. With evening approaching, Bourgeois hides inside a fig to rest. However, a fig wasp
occupies the nest and is prepared to fight him to the death for his spot in its syconium. Bourgeois tries to get out, but finds he will not fit through the ostiole. The wasp slices his right knee with his stinger, and then attempts to open Bourgeois' wound with his teeth. However, the wasp swings and misses, instead getting his jaw latched on the fig skin. Bourgeois shows the wasp an air of mercy and orders the wasp to leave if he wishes to live. The wasp realizes his mistake and accepts the offer, promptly making an exit towards the ostiole. Just as he squeezes out, his head gets stuck, and in his efforts to remove it, he beheads himself. Bourgeois uses the body to plug up the ostiole and rests in the Syconium for the night, where he indulges on the fleshy interior of the fig. With 1 day left to live, Bourgeois wakes up, feeling nervous, but confident all the while. He leaves the fig and flies out to the field where he expects Léon Duhan Sommet to be. As he flies over a nearby orchard, a loud buzzing noise is heard overhead. A gust of wind steers Bourgeois off course, and he realizes that a hummingbird is chasing him. Bourgeois struggles to remember the evasive maneuvers he learned from his early pollination patrol days, and flies a chaotic path parallel to the orchard. Soon, Bourgeois forgets about the hummingbird and decides to fly straight towards Léon Duhan Sommet. Unfortunately, within 10 meters of the holy dandelion, the hummingbird's beak pierces Bourgeois' wings, and Bourgeois drops to the ground, nearly falling unconscious. In pain, Bourgeois crawls to Léon Duhan Sommet, but becomes confused when he sees a nearly identical dandelion right next to it. He crawls up the one he believes to be Léon Duhan Sommet, but upon reaching the top and not feeling any different, he then chooses to try and fly to the top of the other dandelion. Due to his broken wings, however, Bourgeois is unable to make it across, and he crashes into the grassy canopy below. After being blown around by a strong gust of wind and wrestling for a few more minutes, Bourgeois begins climbing again, this time on the dandelion he is sure is Léon Duhan Sommet. Just as he begins his climb, a snake dashes through the grass and spots Bourgeois. The snake tries to eat Bourgeois by lunging at him, but misses, slamming into the dandelion stalk with some force, knocking petals all over the surrounding foliage. What do you bet this is the same snake from beforehand?
Yeah.
I think so. I think he was just looking for Bourgeois. He didn't want those ants. The snake tries again, latching onto one of Bourgeois' remaining hind legs and pulling him off the stalk of Léon Duhan Sommet. Right as the snake tries to bite down on him, Bourgeois stings the snake's tongue, quickly releasing himself from its mouth but gashing open his abdomen in the process. Barely conscious, Bourgeois crawls over to the stalk again, bleeding profusely and seeing his last moments before his eyes. As Bourgeois climbs flimsily up the stalk, a surge of energy comes through his 2 remaining legs, and his knees feel reinvigorated with a strange pulse. He feels young again and wonders if Léon Duhan Sommet has magical healing powers capable of curing his cancer. Just as he reaches the final leaf before the crown, Bourgeois is knocked off of Léon Duhan Sommet one last time as a lawnmower flattens it with its wheel. Bourgeois watches in anguish as the once mighty Léon Duhan Sommet is sucked up by the mower deck and spat out upon him in innumerable pieces. A gust of wind from under the blade deck blasts Bourgeois across the field, and as Bourgeois rolls across the rocks nearby, what remains of his thorax is spread all across the grass as his entrails are scattered. Bourgeois looks around and sees a nearby anthill, shouting to some nearby ants that he wishes to be put out of his misery and sacrificed. Looking up to the sky now, Bourgeois cries out to the bee gods and falls unconscious, his mind set on Hyven. Bourgeois wakes up in the Haas Beetole, confused as to why he is not in Hyven. A nurse bee reminds him that he had a bad fall in the bee retirement home, prompting Bourgeois to ask how long he has been there. The nurse bee reminds him of the events of the past week, and his fall from a quince tree 9 days beforehand that forced him into retirement. Bourgeois realizes it with horror that his expedition was all a dream, and he shouts in anger at the honeycomb ceiling above.
Ease knees.